Hey there team, welcome back to the channel, welcome to an overview of Void Crew. So this is a little bit different, it's not exactly brand new. I mean, it did come out last year, but it's had a bit of a big patch. The main thing that I was interested in is it adds more players to this game, and we'll talk all about that, but you can play 6 players. So I herded the cats together, my god, what a nightmare, and got the boys together, and we had a big old session. We had a great time, long and short of it, not to bury the lead. I will point out though, I tend to just cover new releases on this channel these days. The scope is just too big otherwise. However, the good news is I'm running a second channel, The Return of the Scarlet Seeker. You should go across there and check that out. I'm pretty much running the same sort of content, albeit for older releases or things like this, you know, updates after the fact. So we'll do this here for the time being, obviously, but if you're interested in me shouting out old bangers that I recommend, and I line them up with sales when I do the videos as well, then you should check that out. So there's a little bit of a plug. Anyway, Void Crew. I looked at this when it came out, I was really impressed. And it's still the same game, it hasn't really changed much at all, but I still got a massive evening staying up till midnight with the lads playing it. Some old hats, some new, so it was a good little sample size, so it was cool to come back to it. So I'll break down what this game is and tease it apart a little bit for those that might not be across it. Void Crew is one of those co-op party-based type games that you see come along, and it's not something like Left 4 Dead, where it's a little bit more about run and gunplay action. Now, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of shooting and killing and all that, but this leans into a bit more of a busy work, plate spinning type experience. I say plates, I immediately think of Plate Up, but that's a good example as well. Actually, if you ever played Plate Up, totally different perspective, but the whole idea, it's co-op people, you're trying to work together, and the efficiency is how well you manage all the different jobs that need doing at any given time. My main thought going into this when I realized it was 6 players and that they haven't added a new ship or anything like that, so let's call it the traditional 4-man ship from the original release, that's what you crew with 6. I wondered if that would just undermine the entire design philosophy. And no, not only does it work, but it actually makes you realize it should have been 6 players from the start. So I really have to wonder about that. Anyway, the long and short of it is it works just fine. But you're a space crew in this spaceship. I actually really like a lot of the aesthetic designs. The ship looks eerily similar to something like the Normandy from Mass Effect. But you know, your interiors and even the lobby area where you boot up, someone pointed out it's very Art Deco, true, but I also see an almost golden Egyptian space Stargate type aesthetic leaning in there as well. But I think what we can all agree on is it is fairly unique in a space where, as much as I love sci-fi, a lot of the vision of what sci-fi is often blurs together in that same high-tech futurism. So you each play a little dude, there's a whole upgrade tree that you can specialize down and get special abilities if you want to be more like a pilot or a gunner, that sort of thing. And I would also argue that a lot of these upgrades, the sweatier you get, the more you understand the game, the more essential they become. I ended up speccing into the Scavenger, which is the dude that sort of leaves the ship and goes on away missions, and you get a grappling hook, and that's basically compulsory if you want to navigate and try and hook back onto the ship, so as to, you know, not hold up the crew. Likewise, we had a few of the boys go on gunners, and they essentially get like a turbocharge attack thing, which, from what I understand, was a bit of a must-have. So what we might actually do is just talk down how the run works from a higher level. They've added a wave-based survivor mode. We didn't really have a chance to check that out because, again, it's one of those things, everyone's still learning. Each of these runs go from anywhere between like an hour to 2 hours. I think you can save state. I saw the option in there. We never did. But even the main run-based system has an infinite lead to it. It doesn't really stop. It just keeps ramping and generating missions. So suffice to say, yeah, I get it. They've got a new infinite mode, but they've already got a perfectly good core infinite mode, at least in my experience playing it. So everyone queues up, you pick your role, you go into the ship, and the idea is that you're doing, Slay the Spire type roguelike run-based instance hopping. It's very linear or streamlined, if you like, from that perspective. You essentially have these little instances, well, they're big, but they're an instance that your ship is within. There'll be a mission to complete, whether it'll be shoot up bad guys or go loot a wrecked facility. There's quite a lot of different stuff to do, but to exit the instance, you need to charge up your hyperspace jump drives, and it's got a very novel way of doing it, being that you've got a port and starboard engine with a, centerline symmetry. They've got two little handles that you can rip down on that. Now, if you just boot them up, it'll start charging from 0, and that takes a while. And once it gets to 100%, you're able to hyper jump. However, if you coordinate with one of your mates and you count it down and you both rip the mirror handles at the same time as like a two-man switch, it'll jump straight to 75% charge, so it's almost instantaneous. And then after that, and terrible communications, everyone yelling and screaming, the pilot will align with the jump vector and jump, and if you're silly enough to not be sitting in a seat, you get pulverized into a wall. So there's just a little bit of a taste of some of the co-op shenanigans that this game's built around. So if you don't play nice with others, you're probably not going to do so well in this game. But then there's lots of different things to do. The pilot kind of is a bit divorced from everything else that's going on in the ship. Doesn't really have any motivation to ever leave his seat, and he sees the world through a different view. I'd also argue that there's a lot of responsibility put on the pilot too. But again, if you've got your group of dudes, we had one guy he just really enjoyed being pilot, and we were like, do you want to rotate out? No, he was happy as Larry, so that's fine. Likewise goes, we had some dudes that just like being on the guns, some that like being engineers. Again, I ended up being a scavenger because I was just filling in, flexing around the group and helping where I could. What's really interesting is that it is the same set ship. So I guess, your Sea of Thieves type thing. It is standard architecture. But it does have all these modular little slots around it. Like there's 2 at the front, I think there's 4 on either side, and then there's 2 at the back. And depending on the ship loadout you pick at the beginning, you can just pick a basic entry thing. You can have ones that favor laser weapons, ones that favor like machine guns. So your starting kit loadout is, again, like a Slay the Spire, picking the character going in. You can move all this stuff around freely, you can craft new things. You can get like a tractor beam to suck in loot from outside and break that down or repurpose it, that sort of thing. So it has this, modular interplay. It's not that you build the ship from scratch or anything like that. So it's this sort of middle ground in between. So that's mostly where your gunners will be, because they'll sit inside one of those gun seats. It all looks really cool, and I'm particularly fond of the kind of minigun bazillion bullets firing. Like you can install shield systems as well, and they're directional. At one point we came up with a pretty powerful strategy where we only had the shield pointing on the starboard side, but it was super powerful, and our pilot would just broadside position. So we did that to mitigate the relative weakness on the sides. You can also install point defense weapons, which is not something you see in games very often. You put, a couple thousand rounds into that, and it just auto fires down, and shell casings are spraying everywhere, the interior. There's something very cool about it, watching all the guns just firing a bazillion bullets a second. So in that case, when you're going more, let's say, kinetic, more machine guns, you kind of need a gun jockey, an ammo jockey, and I ended up doing that for a little bit, and that was fun. You're just fabricating ammo and running it back and forth. You have no idea what's going on in the battle. Explosions, fire coming out the wall, electricity, you're trying to patch all that up, where you just keep jamming ammo in. You feel like one of the bloody ammo couriers from the Matrix 3 or something like that. It was a very cool experience. I quite enjoyed that. And then the engineering part has a whole bunch of nuance to it as well. For example, the pilot has like a shift boost system, and in order to get those, the engineer in Engineering Bay has to flick these switches to recharge them. So you have to communicate that I'm out of boosts. You have to stay on top of it. There's this whole trim system, and it's actually really clever, and the way that it telegraphs. In the engine room, you'll have a control display that shows circles and lines, and they correspond to essentially circle valves, so it has that visual cohesion, and levers, vertical, horizontal, but they're like lines. And at a glance, you can go, oh, right, okay, on the port side, we've got 2 lit up circles and 1 lit up line. And so you run up and down the starboard side of the ship and you look for these valves, and some will just be blowing gas, or some will have fire, or not. There'll be some visual indicator, and all you got to do is close them. And every one of those things that you don't repair makes it more and more sluggish for the maneuverability of the pilot. So it's one of those things you have to stay on top of. It's a slow killer. You also have this power system, which is wild, and the theme of this world, we picked up some lore shards, but we never really got into it too much, but it's doing a really strange lore. You got this weird baby fetus thing, the homunculus. So it's in this formaldehyde tube that you plug in, and that powers your ship, and you turn it on, but you have a whole bunch of circuit breakers. So for each of those modular areas, like say you've got gun systems, they have to draw power, and the laser ones will draw more than the machine guns, but everything draws power and it all adds up in the corner of your UI. And your ship only has so much capacity. It might only have 8 power. Now you can upgrade it, you can build power plants, but generally speaking, a big part of the engineering minigame is feathering and harnessing that power level, because if you overdraw, you will start throwing circuit breakers. You've got 4 of them and you have to just reset them. No harm, no foul. But if all 4 of them go, it will spit the homunculus power tube out, think Star Trek power core. Everyone will go into zero gravity, everything will turn off and need resetting, and people will inevitably forget to turn the shields back on or the life support, so you'll all start suffocating. So it's one of those things you have to stay on top of. And then on top of all of that, a big part of the run-based jumping from sector to sector and getting rewards is you can slot artifacts that can give you different bonuses. There was one point where I was kind of engineer, where we were doing a laser gun run, and for every circuit breaker that we let trip, it would add a multiplier to the damage output, the guns. So I was sort of just sitting on the circuit breakers, doing my best to, ride the lightning. Don't let the 4th one break, but maybe let the other 3 break, and you just got to try and get the timing right. And if you stuff it up, you're going to brick the whole ship. But it has this sort of greed dynamic. Anyway, look, I think I've covered off on a bunch of the mechanics. You can sort of see what's going on there. It's a lot of fun. It works incredibly well with 6 players. I would argue better than with 4 players. However, as far as the mechanics go, it's exactly what I remember before. So yeah, they've added some modes, and yeah, they've added some more seats, but they haven't really changed the game. So if you didn't like it when it first came out, this is not going to change your mind. I don't think so. I'd be very curious to see. I can't think the name of it off the top of my head, but there is another game coming out like this, The Opposition, if you will. People are getting pretty hyped for, because it does seem to have a first-person combat component to it, which is not in this. And I don't know what to think about that. I mean, it's easy enough to just jump on the train and go, yeah, that'd be cool. But I also wonder if it takes away from the ship-based component. I don't know. It would be interesting to see, and I'll probably check it out whenever that thing comes out. Jump Ship, I think it might be called. I don't know. Don't hold me to it. But yeah, Void Crew, it's on a little bit of a sale. It's had a bit of an update. Always good to see the game still being supported. And again, just to tie a bow on it, and if you've made it this far, this sort of video is something that would much more likely be on my second channel. So go and check that out. I think what I'm just going to do is stick to new releases on this channel. That's plenty enough. I'm not running out of games to play, and at least then we can kind of keep it separate. Maybe if you're a bit more of a deal hunter for classic old games, the second channel's there. And if you're more interested on tip of the spear, new stuff that maybe you can't be bothered buying and checking it yourself or what have you, and you'd rather, throw me under the bus and make me play all the terrible games. I shouldn't say that. Most of them are great. But anyway, that's how we'll split the content. I think that'll work out better. All right, team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.